Hey, what's up guys? This video is for section 7-1, which is multiplication properties of exponents, and this is the second video, which is obviously part 2, and we are going to continue and talk about more properties of exponents when you are multiplying monomials. So first, let's go ahead and review what is a monomial. So let me put this on the side or right here under the section. And a monomial is the product of a number and a variable. So you guys will have something multiplying. That's a monomial. You guys can have a variable and it can have exponents. Now, a monomial cannot have negative exponents or variables on the denominator of a fraction. So on my previous video, I explained why these are monomials. So you guys can check that out if you haven't seen my first video. And then I also explain why these are not monomials. So for this video, we are going to continue with monomials, and we are going to use properties of exponents for multiplication. So before we actually do examples, let's go ahead and review the properties of exponents. And we are looking at the multiplication properties. So the first property is called product of powers. So I'm looking at this one here. And that is when you guys are multiplying monomials and the monomials have the same base. Well, you guys, if you multiply monomials with the same base, you keep the same base and you're going to add the exponents of those monomials. Property number 2 is power of a power. And this is when you guys raise a monomial with an exponent to some other exponent or some other power. So you guys have a power to a power. So when you guys have those parentheses, you guys can multiply the exponents, the one outside and the one inside, and you guys will keep the same base. So I have the base A right here, but I will multiply the exponents, and let me just put an arrow so you guys know that I am going to multiply those exponents. Now the third property is when you guys have two monomials or something multiplying inside of the parentheses, and you guys are taking all of that to some power. So the product of a product. Product means you're multiplying something inside the parentheses, and you guys have an exponent outside the parentheses. Now let me zoom into this one because this is the one we're going to use today, property number 3. And if you guys haven't seen property number 2 or number 1, that's my first video, so you guys can check that out. You can go back and watch my first video. And property number 3 is when you look at the exponents of the product inside of the parentheses. So I'm looking at the A and the B. The A has an invisible 1 exponent right there, and I'm going to put a 1 so you guys can actually see it. And B also has an exponent of invisible 1 right here. So you guys can put a 1. Sometimes you might have a squared exponent of 2 or exponent of 5, some other exponent, but right now we have invisible 1. So you can take the one outside, the exponent outside, and you multiply by the exponents inside of the parentheses. And you guys multiply every exponent that you have inside of the parentheses by the exponent outside. You're going to keep the same base. So notice I have A, B. So here I have the A, and when I multiply 1 times M, that's M. And here I have the B, and when I multiply 1 times M, that's also M. So that's the power of a product, and that's the one we're going to look at today. So let's try some examples. So I want you guys to notice every example that I have on the screen. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Every example has parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we are multiplying some monomials. I'm saying multiplying because we don't have anything between the two. In this example, we have 2 to the third times, there's nothing in between, so by default they are multiplying. So we are multiplying 3 squared, and then we have an exponent, all of this to the 4th power. Here we have variables, A to the 3rd times, there's nothing in between, B to the 7th power. Now this, guys, is multiplying A cubed times B to the 7th power, and we are going to raise that to the 5th power. And again, over here we have the same thing, but we do have a coefficient, -2 M cubed P squared. So all of this is multiplying each other, and we're going to raise that to the 4th power. And the last one, you see the fraction 1/5 times M times P to the 2nd power, and we're going to raise everything to the 2nd power. Now the common question I have every time I do the properties of exponents, when you look at the first one, and let me just zoom into this one, students like to ask, well, can you do that in the calculator? you put parentheses, 2 to the third power times 3 squared to the fourth power. Yeah, you guys can. You can use a scientific calculator. You can just put this in the calculator and you get the answer. But the idea, guys, for this section is not really learning how to use a calculator, it's learning the properties of exponents. So that's what I'm going to show you guys without a calculator. But eventually, when you guys have these kind of problems, we can use a calculator. And to find the answer, I'm going to use one. But eventually, we can use one calculator. But like I said, guys, we want to learn the property of exponents first. And then, after you know what's happening, you can use a calculator. Now, the one over here on the right side, we have variables, A and B. So here, we cannot use a calculator because the variables don't work on a calculator. So you really have to know the property to simplify the expression. So let's go back to this one. So I am multiplying 2 to the third power times 3 squared. And I'm going to raise everything to the fourth power. So the third property of exponents says that you can take the exponent outside. So we have a 4. And you're going to multiply by the exponents inside of the parentheses. So you guys have an exponent of 3, so you multiply 3 times 4. And you also multiply the exponent of 2 times 4. So let me just put this down so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to use color coded so you can follow along. So the base for the first one is 2. So I'm going to use red. So there's a 2. And I am going to multiply 3 times 4. In the second base, I'm going to use orange right here, 3. So I'm going to put times, I'm going to put it here, times, actually let me change that to black, times 3, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 4. So I am multiplying the exponents, 2 times 4 and 3 times 4, and I am keeping the same base. So let's go ahead and simplify. So I have the base of 2 here. I will multiply 3 times 4, which is 12, times, and I keep the base on this one, and I will multiply 2 times 4 here, and that's going to be 8. So we have the same basis with the exponents. You just need to multiply the exponents. Now you guys are going to simplify, and you guys can do that with the calculator. So let me get one, and I'm going to tell you guys what is 2 to the 12th power. Remember that it's not 2 times 12, so it's not 24. You actually multiply the base 2 by itself 12 times. So that means 2 times 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 2 until you guys get to 12 times. So 2 to the 12th power here is 4,096. And I'm going to multiply by 3 to the 8th power. And that is 6,561. And finally, you guys multiply those two numbers. And we do get a huge number. And I'm just going to write down the number 2687386. I'm going to put some commas so we know what the number is. So here's a comma, here's a comma. So 26,873,856. So that's when you guys simplify this expression. Now, like I said, guys, at this point, I did use a calculator so I can actually find those numbers, and then I multiply those two to find the answer. And it just depends on your class, your teacher, if you guys can actually use a calculator all the time, or maybe you guys can use a calculator sometimes, or sometimes teachers, they don't let you guys use a calculator and you have to simplify by hand. But just ask your teacher and make sure you know what you need to do. Now the next one, I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to use property number 3. So I do have the product of a cubed times b to the 7th power. So I am multiplying, and I'm going to multiply this exponent outside. So let me just put a square around the 5, and I'm going to distribute or multiply the exponents inside. So I'm going to keep the same base. So my base, the first one is a, so I put a right here, and I'm going to multiply 3 times 5. And the next one is b, so I'm going to put b, and I'm going to multiply 7 times 5. So I'm going to have my base of a, and I'm going to multiply the exponents, 3 times 5, that's going to be 15. And the next one is b, and I multiply 7 times 5, the exponents, which is 35. So here, guys, you cannot use a calculator to actually simplify that expression because A times B, you guys cannot use a calculator. Those are variables, they're not numbers. Keep in mind that this means you multiply the base A by itself 15 times. So if you guys want to write everything out, well, you can put A times A times A times A times A times A 15 times, and then times, and then this one you multiply B by itself 35 times. B times B times B times B times B times B times B 35 times. But we don't have to, because this expression is telling us how many times you multiply the base by itself. So that's the answer. Now the next two is where you guys really need to be careful, because we do have coefficients, which are the numbers in front of the variables. So this example here, we have a -2 as a coefficient. -2 times m to the cube, or third power, times p squared, everything to the fourth power. Over here, we have a fraction, that's their coefficient, 1/5 times m times p squared to the second power. So we have to be careful every time we have coefficients in front of the monomial or in front of the variables. So I'm going to zoom into this one and let me explain what you need to be careful with. So first, let's go ahead and apply the property that we learned. Property number 3, if you guys have the product of a monomial, or you guys have different variables inside of the parentheses with an exponent outside, you guys will multiply the exponents, the ones inside, by the one outside. Now you really need to understand what this means right here, -2. This coefficient, it has an exponent. You don't see it, but it actually has an invisible one. So I'm going to put an invisible one here, and we can see the exponent of m, that's 3, exponent of p, that's 2, and the exponent outside is 4. So I will multiply this exponent, the 4, times the exponent of the -2, the exponent of the 3, the exponent of the m, which is 3, and the exponent of the p, which is 2. But I want you guys to notice the negative. The negative in front of the 2 is inside of the parentheses. So what that means is you have to multiply this base with the negative, because it's inside of the parentheses. You have to multiply that -2 by itself 4 times. So how do you actually write it down? Well, when you guys take this base, so I'm going to put -2 in red. I have the -2, and you guys multiply 1 times 4. You actually need parentheses, because the negative is inside of the parentheses. So you multiply 1 times 4, and that's going to be 4. So let me just put that product right there. But I'm going to continue with the next one. The next one, you guys have a base of m. So I'm going to put the m here, and I don't need parentheses because it doesn't have a negative. The negative is only with the 2. So I have 3 times 4. So I multiply the exponents, 3 times 4. And the next one is p. So I'm going to bring down the base p, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 4. Now, in my first video, I remind you guys, when you are raising a number with a negative inside the parentheses to some power, you really have to be careful with the negative. So let me go ahead and simplify these products on top as a fraction. So we're going to have a parentheses, -2 to the 4th power, and then I'm going to have the m to the 12th power. I multiplied 3 times 4, that's 12. And then I have the p, and 2 times 4 is 8. So notice what I'm doing right now. I am multiplying the exponents. 1 times 4 is 4, 3 times 2 is 12, and 2 times 4 is 8. Let me change that to a purple. Let me just erase it, just to be consistent. So here's an exponent of 8. So now let's go back and simplify this portion right here. So let me put a big bubble, so we know that we need to simplify all of this right here. So this -2 to the 4th power, you guys need to be careful with the negative. And like I said, guys, in the first video, I remind you guys what to look for, and I give you guys a trick. So if the exponent, and here's the trick, if the exponent is even and you have a negative inside of the parentheses, that means that your answer has to be positive. If the exponent is odd and you have a negative inside of the parentheses, that means your answer has to be negative. So right now, just by looking at this expression, I know my answer has to be positive. There's a negative inside the parentheses, and there's an even number as the exponents. 4 is even. Now, mathematically, guys, that expression, you actually have to multiply -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. And that's going to turn positive. Negative times negative is positive. Positive times negative is negative. And negative times negative will turn positive. And then you just multiply the actual number. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. So my expression simplifies to positive 16. Once again, it's positive because we have a negative inside the parentheses and my exponent is even. If it's odd, like a 3, 5, 7, then the answer has to be negative, and then you just have to multiply the base by itself depending on the exponents. Now the next one is going to be m to the 12th power. You guys cannot simplify that. And p to the 8th power on the last one. So my answer is here, 16 m to the 12th power, p to the 8th power. Okay, so let's continue with the next one, with the fraction. Remember that you guys, when you have a parenthesis and you have exponents inside of the parentheses, you have to multiply by the exponent outside. So this fraction here, 1/5, that actually has an exponent. Okay, it's a regular number, it's a fraction, but it's a number. So that exponent of 1/5, I'm sorry, not exponent, that coefficient of 1/5 has an exponent of 1. So let me put the invisible 1 on the top. M also has an invisible 1. P has an exponent of 2. So I am going to multiply this exponent 2 times this exponent, the next one, and the next one. Now, since I have a fraction, I'm going to keep the fraction in parentheses so I don't get confused, because when you guys look at the fraction, like this portion right here, it's not 11. 1, 1, not 11. This is the actual exponent. So I'm going to use parentheses, 1/5, and I'm going to multiply the exponents 1 times 2. So there's the 1 times 2, and then the next one will be m, and you multiply 1 times 2 again, and the next one is p, and you guys will multiply 2 times 2. So you guys keep the same basis, 1/5 m, p, but you guys need to multiply the exponents. Now let's go back over here. You guys will simplify, so we get 1/5 squared m squared. So I am multiplying the exponents 1 times 2, 1 times 2, and then 2 times 2. That's p to the 4th power. Now this here, okay, let me talk about fractions. Don't get scared. You just need to know how to multiply those fractions. 1/5, which is a fraction, squared, it means that you are multiplying that fraction by itself 2 times. So I am going to multiply 1/5 times 1/5. Notice, you just write it down 2 times. 1/5 times 1/5. The variables will stay the same because you guys cannot simplify the m and the p, so you just keep it the same. But let's go ahead and multiply the actual fractions. You multiply the top, 1 times 1, that's 1. In the bottom, 5 times 5 is 25. So you guys have 1/25. We have the m squared, and we have the p to the 4th power. So my answer is 1/25 m squared p to the 4th power. Now, this expression that you guys see on the screen is actually using more than one property. I have been showing you guys one property at a time, and I show you property 1, 2, and 3. And there's more, guys, but in this video, I'm just showing you guys the first 3. So we are going to combine one property, maybe 2 properties. You guys can use as many as 3 properties in one expression to simplify, but you just have to know how to use the properties. So let's look at the first one. So we have here, we want to simplify the expression 2c cubed h squared to the 3rd power. So I do have parentheses with the cube, and then I have -4c cubed h to the 2nd power. Now, first of all, you guys want to get rid of the parentheses. So the exponent outside, you are going to multiply by the ones inside. Remember the 2 has an exponent of 1. So let me just write that down now. So we have 2 to the 1st power, and then c has an exponent of 3, h has an exponent of 2. So I'm going to multiply this exponent times the 1, the 3, and the 2. You guys will keep the same base, but you will multiply the exponents. Over here, there's a -4, but it has an exponent of 1, invisible 1. And the C has an exponent of 3, and the H has an exponent of 1 as well. So I will multiply this exponent times this one, and the one over here. So let's do that first, okay? So I am going to use, I'm going to get rid of the parentheses, but I'm going to multiply the exponents, the one outside and inside. So first, the 2, there's the base of 2. I keep the base, and I multiply 3 times 1, and that's 3. The second base is C. So I keep the base C, and I multiply 3 times 3 is 9. So I put a 9 right here. The next one, the next base is H. So I put H, and I multiply 3 times 2, which is 6. So notice I just keep the same bases, but I am multiplying the exponents. Now, in between the parentheses right here, I don't have a plus or a minus, so that means by default we're multiplying. So I'm going to put a big multiplication sign right here, and I'm going to do the next parenthesis. So keep in mind, there's a negative inside the parentheses, so we have to keep that negative inside. So I'm going to put the -4 inside of the parentheses, and when I multiply the exponents, 2 times 1, that is going to be 2. So I put a 2 right there. So that's the first base for -4. The next one is C. So I'm going to put my C right there, and I'm going to multiply the exponents 2 times 3. That's going to be 6. And the next one is H. So I keep my H right here, and I multiply the exponents. 2 times 1 is 2. So now, guys, you have to simplify your coefficients. My coefficients are the numbers with these ones in front of the variables. So I have 2 to the third power. So I'm just going to put a bubble right here. 2 to the third power. You are going to multiply the base by itself 3 times. 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. So I put 8. I'm going to bring down the C to the 9th. And let me just put a blue C right here to the 9th power. And I'm going to bring down my H to the 6th power. And then on the next one, I'm going to put times right here. And this one here, remember you have a negative inside of the parentheses. Your exponent is even, 2 is even. So your answer has to be positive. And mathematically, you have to multiply the base by itself. So 2 times. So -4 times -4. That's going to be positive 16. I bring down the C to the 6th power and the H to the 2nd power. Now, you guys still have to do more to simplify the expression, because we have a monomial. This is considered monomial because we have numbers with variables, and it has exponents, and we're multiplying another monomial, 16c to the 6th power h squared. So this is a monomial because they're multiplying. Notice the 16 is multiplying the c, and the h is multiplying the c. There's nothing in between. So now what's going to happen is you are going to multiply all those expressions. There's 2 expressions, this one times all of this right here. So at the beginning of the problem, we actually use property number 3, where you guys just multiply what's outside times what's inside, the exponents, the exponent outside times the exponents inside. Now these ones don't have parentheses. So what we have to do is you are going to multiply the same bases using property number 1, which means the same bases, the c to the 9th power times the c to the 6th power, and you are going to add the exponents. The h to the 6th power and the h squared, and you're going to add the exponents. You keep the same base and you add the exponents. The coefficients, the numbers 8 and the 16, well, you're actually going to multiply those 2 numbers. So let me start with the numbers. The 8 times 16, I'm going to put here 8 times 16. And then I'm going to keep the base of c, and I'm going to add the exponents. Now, this is where you have to be careful. Do not get confused with the properties. When you guys multiply monomials with the same base, when you are multiplying, no parentheses, you're just multiplying, you need to add the exponents. So I'm going to add the 9, which is this one right here, and the 6 plus 6. Then I'm going to look at the base of h, and I'm going to add the exponents of the h. So the h, we have a 6. So I'm going to put 6 right here, and I have a 2 over here, plus 2. So I'm adding the exponents. Now when you guys multiply 8 times 16, so let me just put a bubble right here, 8 times 16, that equals 128. And when you guys look at the C, there's the C, base of C. I'm going to add the exponents. 9 plus 6 is 15. So I'm going to put a 15 for the exponent. Then I move on to the next base, H, and I add the exponents of the H. 6 plus 2 is 8. So my answer is 128 C to the 15th power, H to the 8th power. Okay, so let's try another one. Here, same process, but notice that in between the parentheses, we are multiplying. There's nothing in between, so we actually are multiplying this expression. It's a monomial, and it has 3 different variables, times this one over here. Outside of the parentheses, we don't have an actual exponent bigger than 1. There's an invisible 1 here, an invisible 1 over here. Now, you guys can put a 1, but when you guys have an exponent of invisible 1, nothing's going to change. So you don't really need to use that 1. And if you think about it, if you actually multiply this exponent times the 1 inside, well, nothing's going to change. We know this 3 has an exponent of 1. 1 times 1 is 1, so it stays the same. This A has an exponent of 3. 1 times 3 is 3. It stays the same. So every time you guys have an exponent of 1, you don't need to write it down. But we are multiplying these 2 expressions. So same thing as the previous example where you guys multiply the same bases, you're going to have to add the exponents. And you have to multiply the coefficients of those 2 expressions, monomials. So I'm going to start with the numbers. I'm not going to distribute. I'm not going to multiply the 1 times the exponents inside. Like I said, nothing's going to change. But I will multiply the 3 and the 4. So there's 3 times 4. I'm going to go to my A. So here's an A. I'm going to keep the base of A. And there's another A over here. And this A has an exponent of 1. So I'm going to go back. This A in the first parenthesis has an exponent of 3. And when I multiply A cubed times A to the first power, I need to add the exponents. I am multiplying the same base, so you add the exponents. So I'm going to have 3 plus 1. Then I'm going to go to my B's. So I'm looking at the same bases. When you multiply, you look at the same bases, and you add the exponents of the ones that have the same base. So the B in the first parenthesis has an exponent of 1. And the B in the second parenthesis, you're multiplying by a B to the 5th power. So you keep the same base B, and you add the exponents, 1 plus the 5. So there's the 1, and here's the 5. And the next one, you guys have a base of C. So I keep my C right here. And the first C has a 2, and I'm going to add a 3. So notice, 2 and a 3. So I'm going to add 2 plus 3. Now you guys simplify the expression. 3 times 4, I'm just going to multiply the coefficients. That's going to be 12. And then you guys have A to the 4th power. 3 plus 1 is 4. And then we have B to the 6th power. You add 1 plus 5. And then we have C to the 5th power. So my answer is 12, A to the 4th, B to the 6th, C to the 5th power. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at when you guys have fractions and negative inside of the parentheses. Now, first of all, we have to look at what's happening to the ones with parentheses. So this one here, it actually has an exponent of 2 outside of the parentheses. So you guys will have to distribute, multiply this 2 times the exponents inside. Over here, this parenthesis has an exponent of 1. And let me just put an exponent of 1 there. So you don't really have to distribute that 1. Nothing's going to change. But you do have to multiply this squared times the 1 inside. Now remember that negative 24, it has an exponent. This number, this coefficient, has an exponent of 1. So I'm going to put a 1 right here so you know there's an invisible 1. So I'm going to multiply 2 times the 1, 2 times the 3 for the m, and n also has a 1. So I'm going to multiply the 2 times the 1 right there. So with the negative inside the parentheses, I need to keep the negative 24 inside, and I multiply 2 times the 1, that's going to be 2. And then I have m, and I multiply 2 times the 3, and that's going to be 6. 2 times 3 is 6. And then I have n, and I multiply 2 times the 1, that's going to be 2. And I'm going to multiply all of this by the next expression. Now this one, we don't need parentheses because exponent of 1, nothing's going to change. So I'm just going to bring down the negative 1/3, and we have m n to the 4th power. So if you distribute, you multiply by 1, nothing's going to change. Now we do have to simplify 24 squared, negative 24 squared. So it has to be positive because the exponent is even, and you multiply negative 24 times the negative 24, the base by itself 2 times, and that equals 576. Now I do have the m to the 6th n squared, and I'm going to multiply by the negative 1/3 times m times n to the 4th power. So now you guys are going to go to the coefficients. The next step is to actually multiply all of this expression by this expression. So you start with the coefficients. 576, so I'm going to put here 576 times, and I'm going to multiply by a negative 1/3. So that's the coefficients. So we have the 576 times the negative 1/3. Then you guys go to the next variable, or the next base. M is the variable. So we have m, and there's an m over here with an exponent of 1. Since you're multiplying m to the 6th times m to the 1st power, you're going to add the exponent, 6 plus 1. And the next one is n, so you put the n squared times n to the 4th power, and that's going to be 2 plus 4. You guys add the exponents. Now don't get confused, guys, or don't get scared with the fractions over here. When you multiply fractions, let me just put it here. I'm going to make the 576 a fraction. You can actually cross simplify. And 3 goes into 576 192 times. And this is, you can simplify using a calculator, but you guys can turn this into 192. And the 3 goes into the 3 one time. So now it's a lot easier to multiply. 192 times negative 1, well, that's negative 192. And on the bottom, we get 1 times 1, so we get over 1. Now you guys don't need that over 1. So guess what? I'm just going to erase it. So I don't need that 1 on the bottom of the fraction. And the next one is m, and we have 6 plus 1 is 7. And the next one is n, and 2 plus 4 is 6. So my answer is negative 192 m to the 7th n to the 6th power. Now this example here is kind of like going a little bit further when you guys apply the properties of exponents using geometry. So here it says express the area of each figure as a monomial. So we are looking for the area of each figure that you guys see on the screen. We have a rectangle in green and a triangle in yellow. So first of all, we have to remember the formula for each shape. We have a rectangle and we have a triangle. So let's look at the rectangle first. So since I'm looking for the area, I'm just going to write down the formula for the rectangle. The area of a rectangle is base times height. So you guys are going to multiply your base, this one, times your height. So I'm going to put B, and I'm going to write down H, base times height. So we have area equals x y squared, that's my base, times, and my height is going to be x y. So there's my height, x y. So now I'm going to multiply these two expressions. So remember, since we're multiplying same bases, you multiply the x with the x, so those are the same base. Y squared with the y squared, the y over here, those are the same base. So let's figure out the exponents. The x here has an exponent of 1, the x over here has an exponent of 1. So a is going to equal, and I'm going to have my x, and you add the exponents. 1 plus 1, that's going to be 2. So I have an exponent of 2. And then I move on to the y's. So the y's, you multiply y squared times y to the first power. So you guys add the exponents of the y's. 2 plus 1 is 3. So I'm going to put y to the third power. And that's my area. My area of the triangle as a monomial is x squared y cubed. Why is it a monomial? Because the x and the y are multiplying. There's nothing in between. You guys have a coefficient of 1. The exponents are not negative, and we don't have a fraction with variables on the bottom, so we're good. So it is a monomial, and this is just so you guys can apply the properties of exponents. Now the next one, you guys have a triangle. So first of all, we need to know what is the area of the triangle. So there's a couple ways you guys can do this. I'm going to show you the way I write down the area of a triangle is A equals 1/2 times the base times the height. Okay, now the base is the bottom of the triangle, so this is the base, and your height is actually from the bottom to the tip of the triangle. That's your height. So you see this line right here, from the bottom of the triangle all the way to the tip of the triangle. So that's the height of the triangle. So all you have to do is you are going to substitute those expressions into the formula, the b and the h. So I'm going to have my area equals, you keep the 1/2, that's part of the formula. The area of a triangle is 1/2 times the base times the height. And I'm going to have b, which is 5p cubed, and h is 2p. So I am multiplying 1/2 times the 5p cubed and the 2p. So first, let's look at the coefficients. We have 3 different coefficients. So a equals, I'm going to multiply the 1/2 times the 5. There's the 5 times the 2. So here's the 2. Since I have fractions, I'm going to turn those into fractions over 1 over 1. Then I'm going to multiply the p's. So we have a p cubed times the p to the first power. Now remember, when you guys multiply with the same monomials and they have the same base, you guys keep the base and you add the exponents. So we add 3 plus 1 is 4. So I'm going to put a 4 right there. So p to the 4th power. But let's go ahead and simplify this right here. So we have 1 times 5, that's 5, times 2, that's 10. So I have a equals 10 over 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times another 1 is 2. So you have 10 over 2, and you bring down the p to the 4th power. So we have area equals, you guys actually simplified the fraction, 10 divided by 2 is 5 p to the 4th power. So this is a monomial. The area of a triangle is represented as a monomial. This is one term. You don't have anything in between the number and the variable, so you don't have a plus or a minus. So it is a monomial, and the exponent is positive, so we're good. Alright guys, so this concludes my video for this section. If you guys like my videos, make sure you guys hit that like button. You can also subscribe so you guys are up to date to my videos. And make sure you guys practice, and I'll see you guys later.